Good evening, Hopkinton. This is the October 1st, 2020 school committee meeting. Welcome to October. We are meeting here in the high school library, and we are still complying with the governor's orders and having the public meet via HCAM and its many outlets, YouTube, HCAM TV, and also live stream and Facebook. Okay, so I would like to invite everyone who is here and able to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I think the first item on the agenda is recognitions. Does anyone have any recognitions for this week?
I actually think I do. Monday at 6 p.m., the entire school district had to pivot, and all of our teachers and administration worked frantically that night to make sure that everything could work the next day. And I am amazed by the effort that was put in. And school started on time the next day, so I really want to recognize our teachers, our administration. It was amazing, and it was a lot of work on their part.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The teachers, I can't even imagine how they went from 6 o'clock, having dinner, doing a normal evening, to, oh my goodness, tomorrow my classes are all fully remote. I mean, we are just really indebted to them for their heroic efforts. Thank you for bringing that up. It's just unbelievable. Does anyone else have, I mean, I don't know, how do you top that? But does anyone else have any other recognitions? Okay, so we'll move on to public comment. We have received several public comments tonight, and Nancy has agreed to read them for us.
So the first comment I have is from Nancy Mercer of Hopkinton. My name is Nancy Mercer, and I am a resident of Hopkinton. Question on COVID and travel. If a student is to travel over the Columbus Day weekend to Atlanta, do they need to get a test upon returning to Boston? If they get a test 72 hours before they leave Atlanta, they would be exposing themselves there and at the airport. So do they need to wait after returning to Boston a certain number of days before getting another test? Do they need to have any restrictions or be quarantined before returning to school? So that was the first one. The second one is from Dr. Nusri Agrawal, who is also a Hopkinton resident, who writes, if there is no agreement regarding live streaming between the HTA and administration, would that live streaming stop at a certain point? And one, what would the alternative be? And two, how would that affect the elected remote senior Hopkinton High School students, especially those who have AP courses with very limited choice of online courses? So the next one I have is Joe Eagley of Hopkinton, who writes, can we please get an update on the criteria for pivoting school to fully remote and/or in person? I believe it was previously mentioned that this would be defined and shared in advance of the school year. Please provide an update and advise of where we can view this criteria for future reference. So the next one is from Shaitan Ahuja, who writes, hi, Hopkinton's Public School Committee. While reading the policy, I find the implications here problematic, and this policy seems to cast aspirations on Hopkinton teachers. I ask the following question: who best to guide parents if their kids need some extra help than the child's own teachers? This is regarding the tutoring. While it makes sense to prevent teachers from privately tutoring their own students, I take issue with the line, quote, a Hopkinton teacher cannot recommend that one of his or her own students receive tutoring, end quote. If a student needs extra help, a teacher should feel free to say this. In order to prevent any financial conflicts, it would make sense to say instead, quote, a Hopkinton teacher cannot recommend specific tutoring services for his or her own students. If there is a current or future problem where teachers are violating the spirit of the policy in using their position as teachers to further private tutoring from any particular source, then the policy can be revisited, and I would withdraw my suggestion. So, and the next one is from the same person who writes, "Hi, Hopkinton School Committee. The live streaming policy indicates that parents should not be present during class, which is reasonable as a rule, but exceptions must be made at times for younger children who often need technical or other forms of assistance throughout the day. My son is in kindergarten, and we are called into the room multiple times during the day, either to find this, help with that, etc. For live streaming being adopted as a policy for weather events, I would also recommend that students, and here I mean students who attend school in person and aren't familiar with online instruction, are given clear expectations beforehand. For example, if it looks like there's going to be a snowstorm tomorrow, the teachers prepare kids in the use of Zoom, remind kids to take tablets home, explain the proper use of Zoom meetings and meeting etiquette." And the next one is from Ashley Brown, who is also a Hopkinton resident. "Hi, I'd like to thank our school administrators for starting the school year with on-site classes. I'm incredibly grateful that my child is able to have in-person educational days. I'm also grateful to have direct and timely communications from Dr. Kavanaugh. I have a comment regarding one such recent email, the reopening letter. It stated that if a close contact of a confirmed positive case tests negative on the PCR test, that student still has to quarantine for 14 days. It seems to go against the science. If a PCR test showed that the student has no viral DNA, then that student cannot infect others. Are you worried that the virus is temporarily latent but will replicate shortly after the test? If that's the case, then maybe a second test should be administered after 3 to 5 days of the original negative test. It just seems wrong that the student who tested negative needs to continue isolating for 14 days. I'm grateful that our schools remain open, but this seems excessive and scientifically lacks ground. Best regards, Ashley Brown." And that is all that I had for public comment. I don't know if others had saw any additional that I missed.
I think that's it for public comment. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to reports, and I believe we're starting with Ms. Rothermick in the budget timeline discussion.
Oh, sure. Do you want to? I can give you the screen.
Okay. So this is just to quickly go over where we are in terms of adopting the budget timeline. We had a joint discussion with the Select Board, Appropriations, and School Committee Tuesday night, I believe it was. So in walking through the dates and where we landed, right now we are in that October timeline. So the buildings have all received instructions to begin the process of developing their budget, and they will begin those presentations to Dr. Kavanaugh and I through mid-October through the end of October. You will also see in the middle of October is the review of the capital plan on October 15th. And October 29th tentatively will be for the school committee to approve the capital plan. Moving into November, November 12th, there will be a preliminary budget overview related to the strategic initiatives, which you will hear a little bit about this evening. The capital requests move along with the town manager and the CIC. And then in November 19th, tentatively, we would begin some of those individual budget presentations to the school committee. So if we are able to follow that calendar along, it would be November 19th, December 3rd, and December 10th is tentatively a joint meeting also with the Select Board, Appropriations, and the school committee. And this allows us to pretty much check where we are and make sure that everybody is kind of in line with what the appropriations and select board, where we are at that time. As we all know, the further along in the timeline we get, the better the information becomes. So that December 10th meeting is kind of a check. December 17th was when we were going to present the superintendent recommendation, so that is an open date at this point in time. December 18th, the CPC and CIC will complete their capital hearings and submit that capital plan to the town manager. January 4th, the submission of warrant articles begins. And that would also be the presentation of the superintendent budget recommendation. So January 4th would be that budget recommendation. January 11th would be the public hearing, at which time both the Select Board and Appropriations would also join the school committee, with a tentative vote date for January 18th for the school committee to vote the budget. Then in turn, the budget would be turned over to the town manager the next day. January 26th would be when the town manager consolidates all budget departments and submits that to the Select Board. February 1st, the warrant closes, and then in February is when the Select Board will have their budget and capital hearings. April is the appropriations public hearings, and May 3rd is town meeting, with May 17th being town election. So those were the dates that were discussed, again, with the joint board meeting this week. Are there any questions?
I just want to say we had a good meeting with the Select Board, and we're really grateful for the collaboration and the fact that we have two opportunities in our calendar to get together with both Appropriations and the Select Board, December 10th, and then again in January when we have our public hearing. That I think that's really, it worked out so well last year to have that direct communication, so we're very pleased that we can do it again. And I also just wanted to point out to the viewing audience that in January, our meetings are moving to Mondays for the month of January, so that we can give the community an opportunity to hear Dr. Kavanaugh's presentation on the 4th, and then digest that, and then become prepared on the 11th for a public hearing. And then we'll have another week to digest the public hearing before our vote. And we thought it was important to get that all in and not kind of nestle it around the winter break. So instead of trying to do some of it before break and some after, we decided to do that, and it resulted in our meetings moving to Mondays, just to make that all happen in time for the Select Board to get our vote in time. So if anyone has marked all their Thursdays, correct your calendar. But yeah, I think this looks like what we talked about. I think is. Do we need to vote to approve? We've already voted at the Select Board meeting. Good. So I think.
I don't know that we vote the budget calendar.
We did it.
We did at the Select Board meeting.
You voted to change those, the
Yes,
original.
To accept it as amended, yep.
They requested the vote, and also one of the portions.
So it has been voted then?
Yes. I don't know that all of our meetings were necessarily voted, but the one that we share with the town has certainly been.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment that it is a testament to how hard everybody in our district works, that we are now having people shift after the just mountain of work that has been done and continues to be done on COVID-related pivoting and everything else that's gone into our plans for this. And now we're asking departments and building principals to go back and work on their specific budgets, and that's a huge task in and of itself. But added on to all the countless hours that have been put in to date is really a heartfelt thank you to everybody involved in it, so, and to all of you as well.
Yeah, as you know, the budget process is quite a long process.
Marathon.
It's a marathon. So beginning it now, it really only gives the administrators 2 weeks. But as you said, they also have to touch base with the SMLs and the department chairs, and so there's a lot that has to happen, and also get that all entered into Munis. So it is a lot that has to happen at each building level for this to come together, and I do recognize the amount of work that is ahead for everyone.
And the amount of assumptions that have to be made in order to get a budget out, right? I mean, right now, we don't know anything about COVID in 6 months, in a year, like, so there's so much assumptive work that has to be done as well, that, yeah, I really feel like, once again, they are working so hard. So hard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Kavanaugh, Superintendent's Report.
A little faster than it usually does. Okay, so this is the Superintendent's Report for October 1st, 2020. Before I get started, there's something that is not in the Superintendent's Report, but I did want to just make a request to the community. We have been, sort of sending email, putting it out there on the town website, our Facebook page. What we're really asking the community to do is to just not use our fields or our courts or those things in that period between sort of 7 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And it's sort of most prevalent on the, high school, middle school complex. One of the things that, when you go past if you happen to go past the athletic center here, or if you looked into the gym at the middle school, we're using those things now as cafeteria spaces. So a lot of the physical education classes and a lot of, just other classes, it's nicer to get kids outside, and we've got mask breaks. So our space is really far more utilized than it ever has been. So if people could just sort of, be respectful of our spaces just between 7 and 2, we would appreciate that. I just have a very quick congratulations. I may have mentioned this in August when we first learned about it, but the actual award presentation is coming up. And one of the high school teachers, Steve Spiegel, has been recognized by the University of Chicago when one of the freshmen arrived there, class of 2024. They were asked to nominate an educator whose guidance has helped that student along the path toward their intellectual growth, and Steve Spiegel has been selected for the University of Chicago's Outstanding Educator Award. So what an honor for him and really for our students as well. So it's really lovely.
It's great.
All right, I know people are very interested in the COVID closure, so I will spend a little bit of time talking about this. Sean McAuliffe, who is the health director in town, was hoping to be here tonight. I think he thought that we were meeting by Zoom, and so we will try to get him in here for another session. I actually learned some new things myself this time, so I will be happy to kind of help people understand that. And maybe some of the things on this slide will answer questions that we have received either, by, people just curious, public comment, things that have come to me. So why the closure? As Leah mentioned just a few moments ago, on Monday evening, first of all the building principals met at 5 o'clock after learning from the public health officials that there was another positive case of COVID in Hopkinton in the public schools. By 7 p.m., we had all the messaging out to families. Our teachers, our administrators were amazing. Anything that was going to be delivered in person on Tuesday morning had been transformed to remote instruction, sort of overnight in a 12-hour period. So when we took a look at the contact tracing, and we had this conversation with our public health officials, they were skeptical about, the number of students that could have been impacted in this particular situation. So if a high school student has 7 classes throughout the day or the week, and there's a potential for there to be a minimum of 4 close contacts, so the student who sits in front of, behind, to the left, and to the right, if all of those people do exist because the person's in the middle of the room. So theoretically, we were beginning with 28 sort of potential close contacts. And then when we weigh in things such as, where would a particular student sit during lunch? Would that student sit in the same place at lunch? Probably not, because if you go to English, you might go to one lunch and if you go to math, you go to a different lunch. And because our schedule rotates, there was potential for there to be many close contacts. And then the other issue that was present here is that the date of last exposure could have gone all the way back to the preceding Wednesday, and we were on Monday. So we had 5 days of, that exposure time, during which, any of those close contacts could have been positive, and any of their siblings could have been positive at that point in time. So we wanted to err on the side of caution. There was no possible way. I don't think that we were calling, 40 people in a 12-hour span and having those conversations and getting all the class lists and all of that. But at the same time, public health had said to us, we think that what you need to do is tell anyone in the Hopkinton Public Schools who has a high school age sibling that they should not come to school. And that was the singular line that said to us, you know what, we're going to need to close our doors at least for a day. And because we have an orange day and a green day, and because they were unsure of the magnitude, at least at this point in time, we chose to close for 2. So it wasn't really about deep cleaning in any of our buildings. It was really about ensuring that when the contact tracing was done, it would be done appropriately and thoroughly. So that's the purpose of that closure. I know people are thinking, well, gosh, is that going to happen every single time? And we are just hoping that, in the future, that sort of magnitude and the timing is just a little bit better. When you're coming off of what was a long weekend at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not even like we have somebody still in the building who could say, hold on, let me grab those class lists for you or the seating charts for you. You'd have to call each individual teacher at home and say, I need your seating charts for 5 class periods during the day or whatever. So that's an awful lot of work, and I don't know that people recognize that. So I think we've kind of covered the left-hand side of the screen. And then we've had many, many people ask about close contacts. Do close contacts actually have to quarantine for 14 days if they take a PCR test and if that PCR test comes up negative? And that guidance changed only days ago. So in the beginning, the Department of Public Health would have said yes, but DESE would have said no. So the guidance that we got from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education had said to us that if you have a close contact, the close contact has taken the PCR test, it comes up negative, and the person has been symptom-free for 24 hours, back they come into your public schools, which would have been wonderful. That is not true anymore, and my understanding from the Department of Public Health, and I'm not a public health official, is that the worry is that the incubation period is longer than people assumed that it was, and the incubation period can last 13 and 14 days. So that's why even if you have that negative test, you still need to be out of school and symptom-free until we get to day 14. I know that that is something that has seemed to frustrate families, it seemed to frustrate kids, but the public schools don't get to make that call. Public health does, and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education does. So they have now merged those two organizations, and they are the people who dictate what happens going forward. So if you are a sibling, however, of a close contact, so you are a contact of a contact, you may return to school under a couple of conditions. If your close contact, so if the siblings, close contact, quarantined brother or sister, has been tested and comes back with a negative PCR test, and if in that household they are isolating the potentially positive close contact quarantined student, and there's no contact between the sibling and the quarantined student, then the sibling may come back into the schools when those two criteria are met. And of course, the sibling has to have no symptoms. Now, I also know that people wonder, how is your high school child going to learn when that person is quarantined as a close contact? So I do want to, one of the things that people keep saying is being out of school for 14 days sounds like a very long time. So I do want to make sure that we understand really how many days we're kind of talking about, just so you realize that the magnitude of this isn't 14 days, but it's a long time, and I'm not going to deny that. So let's imagine that a student needs to be quarantined for 14 days, and we start counting from that last date of contact. So let's imagine that we have student X, and today that person has contact on October 1st with student Y. Student Y is unknowingly positive, but student Y is also contagious at this point today on Thursday, October 1st. So on Saturday, student Y learns that he is in fact COVID positive. The Department of Public Health calls. And student X is then identified as a close contact. We have to remember that that date of last contact for student X was Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, those 4 days will count as quarantine days. So on Monday, the student X would be coming to school if it were a green day, but it's not, so that's an at-home day. Student X will miss his in-person day on Tuesday. He'll be out on Wednesday at an at-home day. He will miss his in-person day on Thursday. He'll be out on Friday for an at-home day. Monday is the holiday. On Tuesday, the 13th, he would still be quarantined and miss another in-person day, and then return to school on October 14th. So that particular student, and most students, when we play this out, lose 3 or, sometimes it can be 2, but most commonly 3 or 4 in-person days. Now that is not sort of an acceptable thing to say, okay, that's fine, we'll just have him miss those days, because we all know that in our coursework here at Hopkinton High School that moves pretty quickly, you can lose an awful lot of ground. So how is information or instruction going to be delivered to those quarantine students who have been identified as close contacts? They're not COVID positive, they're sitting at home, and they are waiting to, have some kind of instruction delivered to them. What we've told the teachers is that they have autonomy over how that information is shared or how that instruction is delivered. So the following things in that purple font are some of the choices, and we say that they can include, but they're not limited to. So a teacher can email information to a student, put things on Schoology, can offer the student a homegrown video, could offer the student a store-bought video, so there could be anything from Khan Academy to PBS. The teacher could Zoom with that student. The teacher could offer a packet for home study, or even after school, the teacher could offer telehelp. What we need to remember is that our teachers are typically available after the regular school day at 2 o'clock. So if a student wants to, make that plan to Zoom with the teacher, remotely at 2, that can happen as well. Our teachers are very, very willing to make sure that the kids who are in there, they're missing out on their in-person days, have some kind of direct contact with teachers, instruction, information, whatever it is that the kids will need in order to make sure that they are making effective progress while they are out. And, another idea might be to say, okay, if we're doing collaborative work, because we're living in a world where remote communication is just so facile, we could have our kid who's sitting at home be connected to, an in-person peer, and they could work collaboratively as well. So we will try to remain as, sort of vigilant, as careful, as, being attentive and empathetic to the situation of those students who are quarantined close contacts. And I would encourage any student who is a quarantined close contact, who doesn't feel like they're getting what they need, or who feels like they are uncertain about any kind of learning, to reach out immediately to your teachers, and I know that teachers will respond. All right, why are things different at the elementary level? Well, if we have 10 students in an elementary classroom, and those students are kind of cohorted together for 6.5 hours, it would be very difficult, I think, for a teacher to say that, Amanda and Nancy weren't next to each other for greater than 15 minutes, or when you sat next to each other in the cafeteria, or when we had a reading group, or there's just enough movement in an elementary classroom where we would be saying, it would just be likely that we would say, you're all close contacts. So that would put the entire classroom into close contact quarantining. In which case, if the teacher had no other kids to teach in that room, it would be very easy for that person to say, well, I'm just Zooming with my whole 10 students today. And that works out beautifully because they're getting that kind of in-person time. That will never work at the high school level because if I'm the math teacher and I lose 3 students in that class, I still may have 7 that I need to teach in person every day. So that's sort of the difference between the elementary situation and the secondary situation. High schools are just really unique animals, I think.
Can I ask you a question that has come up quite a bit? I think you talked about it last night on Hangout Hour, but people have asked about the distancing. If I'm already sitting 6 feet away in the high school, say, and I'm wearing my mask, aren't I safe? Like, why am I, because I'm more than 6 feet. So I don't know, there was some conversation last night about a 6.5 feet, and I'm not sure. I wonder if you could just talk to that.
Sure. One of the things that we learned when we were meeting with the Department of Public Health, so the head nurse, Mr. Bishop, the town nurse, the nurse at the high school, and we had a debrief because we always want to say, what is it that we can do better or differently in subsequent situations? And so one of the things that we learned in that setting was, even though we say you need to be 6 feet apart and, you should be safe, what Sean McAuliffe has said is that when you're talking about that 6 feet, we're not going to squabble when we get to places of, well, was it 5 feet 11 inches? Was it 6 feet 4 inches? They like to err on the side of caution. So even though we are all, sitting 6 feet apart, if I am COVID positive, the two of you would immediately become close contacts, even 6 feet apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to highlight that, so we couldn't, and I know this is a space issue as well, but I think it's important to kind of highlight for the community, we couldn't move desks a foot further apart and put them at 7 feet, that wouldn't work. That's not where the issue is.
Correct. I think even if we had some classrooms where we say, oh, look, there's only 7 kids here, we can really move the desks apart to 7 feet apart or 8 feet apart. That would not be true in all of our classrooms. One of the reasons why we're not going every day is that when the state recommended 3 feet, we said we better stick with 6 feet. We would feel a whole lot safer that way. 6 feet, and I guess maybe I'll kind of diverge a little bit here, but kind of as we are looking at what is going to happen now with our close contacts, okay? So we're still waiting on testing and all of that. But in the event that all of our close contacts who are in those classrooms happen to come back negative, we can feel really good about that 6 feet of social distancing with a mask on, hand sanitizing, hand hygiene, because then we'll get that sense that it can work, So, but the Department of Public Health would want us to say that, and we do need to bring in half of a classroom. If that's 10 or 11 or 12, there's just not the physical room in a classroom to spread out even further than that in a lot of cases.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I get this. So elementary school students, the assumption is that they're just moving around a whole lot more. Is that the sum of it? That it's hard to say who wasn't within 3 or 6 feet of each other?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know that it's so difficult that, maybe a teacher would know that in a day, I never ever came within 6 feet of, Meg Tyler, but does know that I sat next to Jen Parson for most of the day. When we first got our guidance from DESE, they had said that in an elementary classroom, everyone would be considered a close contact. Then they backtracked on that, and they said, no, we can just use the people who are immediately around the elementary school students. And now there's sort of a shift going back the other way to say, if they've all been in the classroom, and maybe Amanda and I are in the same reading group, or maybe Jen and I do something in PE wellness together, and maybe, Joe, you and I sit next to each other in the cafeteria. It's really, really hard to say of the 10 kids that would be in that elementary classroom, who was and who wasn't a close contact. It just might make sense to close the
And the main
whole
thing is
group.
coming from DESE, right?
It is,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
I do need people to know that the schools do not make these decisions.
we're not
We
making
made
this
a
up.
decision to go with 6 feet, but, DESE and the DPH are really guiding all of this. I know parents want to know what happens to students on IEPs if they must quarantine as a close contact. regardless of, whether you're a close contact and you're home quarantining, it doesn't really matter, no matter where a student is on an IEP in terms of location for learning, at home or in school, that student, the services outlined in the IEP will be met.
May I make a quick comment?
Sure.
And I think this was sort of us too when we read through the letter and edited the letter and everything that went out Monday. But there was a comment from a person in the community to me that made a lot of sense to me, which was, well, why wasn't the 5-day student mentioned in here? Like, what, how does the 5-day student get treated in this? And so I feel like it's just something we should keep in mind the next time we have to do something like this, to consider the students in all the different rotations, because that 5-day student may have come in contact with somebody in those classrooms and may also need guidance in terms of like remote learning or et cetera.
Sure.
So.
Point.
Okay, I also wanted to just include the homeschooling numbers. And I want people to know that these are the new homeschooling numbers, so these are not the, kids who have been homeschooled for years. These are people who have made that transition this year. And, Jen, you can certainly offer a little more information here, but what we're inferring here is that these are folks who have made that transition because of the pandemic.
Just for clarification, that number has not, it's not 23 since our last meeting, that's the total, correct?
That's a total of new ones. There are lots of other homeschooled children who have been for a long time.
Total new this school year.
Yes. And that's all I've got for you.
Any questions for Dr. Kavanaugh? I'm grateful that you and the Department of Public Health took the conservative view for a 2-day shutdown to maybe prevent a much worse shutdown if we didn't catch this sooner. So I think it seemed, I honestly do not know how the teachers pivoted so quickly and the administration, but it seems like it was a good preventative measure to take this step and take care of the contact tracing thoroughly.
Yes, and we've even had conversations with DESE about our closure and was it appropriate, or, so you don't get to just close, you have to talk to everyone before
Interesting.
So I did actually have one comment, which is I had noted on Facebook through the Hopkinton Public Schools Facebook account that the deadline for anybody wishing to pivot from hybrid or remote or vice versa was extended until midnight, so that anybody looking to consider any of the information that came out.
Yes, I do think that it's important for people to have a sense of, why did those 2 days happen, because it may inform some decisions. I did a lot of, kind of conversations on the phone today with people who were, I think, maybe just looking for some of those answers and a little bit of guidance, and I think, it made people feel a little bit better, so.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I have a short chair report, if you wouldn't mind advancing. Community engagement, we did have some correspondence with the HTA since the last meeting. We received a letter on the 17th raising some concerns over live streaming, which we acknowledged on that date, but we as a public body did not have an opportunity to discuss that until our next executive session, which didn't occur until the 23rd. So as an interim measure, I responded on the 21st to acknowledge a few of the points in the letter and some policy considerations that the district, that we are looking at to support live streaming. And I indicated that we would be meeting on the 23rd, which we did. And then the school committee met on the 23rd, and in discussing the response to the letter, we referenced our policy BHC, which is in our policy manual, which basically says that the school committee communicates to the staff through the superintendent. And accordingly, Dr. Kavanaugh responded to the the specific points in the letter on the 24th. In addition, we get lots of email. We had, I didn't honestly count them, but I know there were over 100, I believe, emails that we were copied on mostly from teachers, but also some from community members, who were requesting that the teachers be notified if one of their students in their class is positive, whether or not the teacher was considered a close contact. And in the process of receiving all those letters, actually the teachers were notified, and I think there was some crossover, but we do appreciate that request, and the Department of Public Health was able to approve the process for us to let a teacher know if someone in their classroom tests positive. We received several emails with questions about how quarantine students will continue learning, which has been addressed by Dr. Kavanaugh. We received a few emails with questions about how to switch between learning modes, and as Nancy mentioned, the deadline has been pushed to midnight tonight, and hopefully people will now have more information. I would also reference last night's hangout hour with Dr. Kavanaugh and Mr. McAuliffe from the Board of Health. That's available on the HCAM website. Lots of really good information about how the closure happened and what the considerations were, so it's a little bit more background information. We received a couple of thank you emails. That was nice, so thank you for those. And we did receive one email with questions about some specific live streaming, I think, and two emails requesting clarifications on where negotiations are currently with the HTA. Next slide. I don't have to go into anything about the budget timeline because Ms. Rothermere covered it, but we did have our meeting with the Select Board on Tuesday to talk about the budget. And beyond that, I also signed both an operating expense warrant number 21020 and also a warrant for bus refunds 21021. That's it for me. Okay, so I believe that brings us to liaison reports. Does anyone have a liaison report for tonight? We have a super full agenda, so that works. I did have a HOP Coalition meeting, but nothing that we need to cover tonight. And office hours, I don't know if anybody has any recommended date for our next office hours or day of the week or anything to consider there. If not, I could just take this offline and suggest some days.
Go offline.
Offline, excellent. That brings us to new business, and we are very fortunate tonight to have a cast of wonderful people. The school principals are here to share their school improvement plans because unbelievably in the middle of COVID and reopening, I guess life goes on. And so every year we hear from each principal what their school improvement plans are, and tonight is that night. So I'm not sure what order you guys want to go, and the first one we have is marathon, if that works.
Amanda, can I just say how excited I am as a new school committee member to hear something other than COVID?
I know, right?
How are our schools improving is a great topic.
I know. Oh, do you need another chair? Or do you want to pull a desk?
I know. Thinking we'd present. We can
Great.
shift back and forth.
We can give you space.
Yeah, we can get another chair.
I know, we can
We
make
could,
more chairs.
here, you could sit here, Leah.
Just sit sideways.
I can make this work.
I survived center school, I can fit in this chair this way. Is that work? Yes, it works.
Yes, we're so excited to talk about like regular business. This is fabulous. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so thank you for having us. We haven't been here in quite some time, so it's good to see you all in person. Something that we've done over the last few years is when we develop our school improvement plan, knowing the age and the transition with students from Marathon to Elmwood, we share goals for that carryover to help promote a transition so students are continuing with skills and focus areas that they've started at Marathon. So we've continued that this year as well. So our first goal, thinking about going back to school during a pandemic, is social emotional learning. So while this has been something that we've continued to focus on over the years, there's an added element this year. We have children that are coming back to school, be it in person or remotely, that have had a wide variety of experiences. Some of them are trauma. When you think about the lack of, all of a sudden, everything they knew was upended. They just stopped coming to school. School changed. They haven't seen friends, peers, they have suffered loss perhaps. So we've taken that into account when we've developed our goals, looking at how we connect with families, with staff, making sure that we're supporting all of our learners, our adult learners, as well as our students. So I know at Marathon, we shared, worked on a survey, and families completed that to help us get to know students. And there were some very personal questions, and we prefaced it, answer it as comfortable as you can, but it greatly helped us get to know the students. Things that we know can happen, that closure that we experienced this week. So we needed to connect with students as best and early as we can. So having this information about children's experiences, have they worn a mask? Have they been out to do errands with their family? That helped us prepare and transition kids to a wonderful start to the school year. So we have done that. We are also mindful of the other events in the world that adults just aren't very nice to each other, okay? So we'll just leave it at that. So incorporating social justice standards into our curriculum and areas. When you think of that as an adult, it's a very heavy concept. We have, researched and found an organization called Teaching Tolerance, and they have social justice standards for children. They are age appropriate. It's accepting your differences. It's understanding your identity, realizing families, feelings of others, and becoming accepting of that. So a lot of these are things that we have done, but there's an added intention here because we know that we're trying to help prepare these children to be better adults so that the world is a nicer place when they get to be an adult. Our routines, we have done a lot on procedures and operations to get ready for the year, and that's also part of social emotional learning, is that comfort of expectation. What does it look like? And even for our remote learners, what does their day look like? What's the predictability of it? And we know those schedules are changing as we adapt to children that need more breaks, that are building up stamina. We experienced that with staff during the PD days. Staff had to build up stamina. It was a long time we hadn't attended to something for a full day in quite some time. So these are areas that will continue over the course of the year. Next week, we actually have PBIS coaches training. We had worked on a grant that Mrs. Parsons secured for us through the University of Connecticut, and that work has continued. And we're continuing to train our staff so that we have in-staff experts to bring that to our communities.
So, thanks. And I think it's important to just reemphasize that I think when Lauren and I came to Hopkinton, one of the things that we tried hard to do was to create an atmosphere between the two schools at K-3 where students didn't leave one school and go to another and everything was drastically different. It was important to us to help create some systems that would link us and have the kids feeling like I understand what school looks like and it won't drastically change. The teachers at Elmwood are going to continue what is started in Marathon in terms of the core competencies, self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making. The students will also, and teachers will talk about social justice standards, feeling good about yourself, and then being able to recognize there's joy in learning that someone is different and that someone who's different from me might also be similar to me. And sort of discovering those ways and being curious about other people who are alike and different. I conducted a staff survey much in the way that Lauren did a student survey. I conducted something similar with my staff to make sure that I knew when we came back to school what kinds of things did the staff need, and that's something that felt a little different for me this year. I think that teachers coming back to school needed a little more from me and from all of us in order to feel ready to be back at school. Our guidance counselor over the summer wrote a grant so that we could provide some materials ongoing this year. We call Elmwood the Nest, and we came up with a slogan this year that says protect the nest. We stole it from Northeastern. I happened to see a video that's how Northeastern was encouraging students when they came back to campus to be good to one another, and there are some folks who think things like, I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm not worried about getting sick. And so what we talked about is, though you may not feel you need a mask, wearing a mask is going to protect our nest. And it helped sort of frame that thinking for little people, and I thought it was brilliant, so I didn't make it up. But we did steal it to use. And we're creating materials for every classroom so that they can have what we are calling time in instead of time out. areas in the classroom, calming corners, opportunities to strengthen skills to talk about how you feel, your big feelings and maybe your little. We are also engaged in the work of PBIS and recognizing positive behaviors. And I think this is probably, and in large part because of the 10 days we had before school started, we did an amazing amount, and when I say we, I really mean the paraprofessionals, because I did not do the work, but the paras really came into school every day and worked tirelessly to create signage and directories for kids, because lots of the things we used to do to prepare kids for school didn't happen this year. So we had arrows that this is where this teacher is, and this is how you can, and it really felt on day one, I felt as if kids came in so slowly and so carefully and so intentionally that we really almost, it felt like we greeted every little person as they came through the door, and it was really incredible. So that's just some of the work that we've started, and we're excited to keep that going at Elmwood. Our second goal is around literacy, and like our SEL goal, this is work we have been sort of taking on for several years, and it's morphing a little bit this year into giving kids some skills to apply broader literacy skills in the things that they're reading. And we also want to be really intentional about the kinds of reading materials that we're putting in the hands of kids and making sure that those are reflective of who each child is, as well as the other people that we see in our world. We want to make sure that we open kids up to new perspectives, and that's some work we'll do this year around literacy. We want to, our teachers will be taking a careful look at their own materials to make sure that their classroom libraries and the materials that they're using in instruction are inclusive and reflective of the places that we want to be educationally. We also have talked a lot about finding entry points in our curriculum where we can insert some really powerful literature, because we know that with the K-3 students, that we teach quite a bit through the books that we choose. So that's some intentional work. Some of the other goals and things that we hope to do this year is really get more comfortable with technology. I think what people have learned over the past 6 months in terms of how to use technology in a gen ed classroom or a typical classroom has been, it's been a fast-paced course in how do I deliver instruction, and how comfortable teachers have gotten has really been incredible. Using Seesaw, using Zoom, using webinars, and we're really coming up with some neat ways to use the tools we had to use to have more powerful instruction and time together. And the last thing that something that we're putting into our instruction this year is interactive read-alouds. That's something that actually Vanessa Bolello had looked into and purchased for Hopkins School, and it became very clear that those were materials that would be really wonderful to use K-3, and we were able to use some grant money to purchase those for all students. And one of the most exciting parts about using the interactive read-alouds is providing kids with sort of a global experience with reading, and the books are, they meet the goals that we've talked about earlier in terms of sort of creating mirrors and windows for kids with literature, and that's going to be exciting. Teachers are just starting to unpack those materials and make decisions about how they'll use them in their classrooms.
And along with our launch into technology and learning all of the different avenues and means that we can use technology, looking at the family aspect of how do we engage families to help them support their readers. You know, what are things that you can do that support, what are things that are best not to do right now that might be later when they're a little older, or actually try this suggestion or strategy. So our plan is also to have some webinars, some different things for families to help them, because we know that they are now in the seat of supporting learning like never before. And that's a new role, and it can be challenging.
I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Do you guys have any questions?
Comments? I have a couple of comments. Sure. First, it's really wonderful to see you guys back here. It feels like it has been a very long time. But I really, am so impressed with the way you are intentionally bringing in social justice to talk with our youngest learners. I think that's not always been something that has come easily as a society, and I think when we're starting at those ages, I think it bodes well for our future. So thank you for that. Also, love that you're looking at literature to be reflective and inclusive of kids. I think that's really important. And the resources for families, I think, are going to be so appreciated. And also just a huge thank you to all of your staff, your teachers and your paraprofessionals and everybody for transitioning with these little kids. I'm sure has been challenging with the masks and some of these new restrictions that are in place. And I just have heard really all wonderful things from the community about how teachers have coped with kids that have had a little bit more difficulty with it. So thank you, and thank you all for.
Oh, and Amanda said it earlier, I think that people have reached out with gratitude.
Yeah.
In a way that has been amazing and so appreciated. Every day teachers will, you should see this email I got, look at this card that I got, I heard from so-and-so, and it really means a lot to teachers. They are working incredibly hard, and the gratitude that the community is showing has been really appreciated.
I'm so glad to hear that, because people often say, what can I do? The teachers are so great. Can I send them a basket? Can I do? And, I often say anyway, they probably just wouldn't mind a note, like,
Yep.
if you feel that way.
Those are powerful.
Because I think, everybody, in any job, you
Yeah.
kind of, if you get a little note that says, hey, thank you, it's really nice. And
Teachers are forwarding messages to me and saying, I just wanted you to see this. And maybe people don't realize how powerful that is. It's been wonderful.
It's great.
So I wanted to comment, I really love that you're using teaching tolerance. That's a very good system, sponsored by SPLC, so it's awesome. Thank you. Wonderful. Two, having had a child who had Asperger's and who had a tendency to go quiet, I really love your calming corner idea. I'm so glad that's being implemented. It's so hard for a child who goes nonverbal to kind of be poked and prodded to respond, so allowing them a place to be, that's fantastic, and of course other children can use that as well, but it just brought to mind, wow, that would have been amazing when my kids were little. And thank you. It's a very thoughtful action plan that I see up here.
I just want to say, I wish we did social emotional learning at university, because I need help recovering from this collective trauma that we're all still in. So I'm really grateful you're doing it with the kids, because even though now it's part of the annual curriculum, it's so important right now, because the shape of trauma is so different for each child and each adult. So I really wish I were at Elmwood or Marathon. I think we need that.
Come down anytime.
No, I'm not allowed in anymore.
Oh, that's true.
And this is a great place to be.
That's right.
Can I just ask a quick question? I apologize for my ignorance about the interactive read aloud. What is that?
It's a set of materials, a set of books, and it's an opportunity. They're packaged for teachers, and it's sort of exactly what it sounds like. And the teacher reads aloud a book, and then there are activities, and it's not a guided reading. It's not about teaching the strategies of reading. It's just an opportunity for a teacher to read aloud to a class, but then embed learning into the read aloud. There's purposeful questions, and they help the students interact with the materials, think further, infer things, and they just sort of prod as they go along to help kids to make connections. And it's just an interactive experience. It's a little bit different from just a typical, when I was a teacher, just read aloud to a class and then closed the book and go on to the next thing. This is more interactive.
And the quality of the literature that's part of that has stepped up in terms of what might have been there years ago, so that it's inclusive, it builds background, helps expand children's thinking or look at things a different way. So it's sort of covering quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to say one more thing. Thank you so much for the way you're integrating the two schools. When my kids were little, I was actually in another district, and it was K-5. And I know that those transitions can be really disruptive for a lot of young people, and I think the fact that you have taken the initiative to just smooth that out is just so huge. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mrs. Bilello.
Hello?
Hello.
This doesn't work, does it? Oh, it's just...
It does for each camera.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. So you can see some pictures on the left from our first day. You can't see the bottom of the slideshow, but all of our staff, we have themes every year at Hopkins School. We actually did We're All in This Together back before that was a thing in a pandemic. But this year, our theme is actually the best view comes after the hardest climb. We're still in that climb. We're pretty low on the climb, but I would say it's something all of our staff has embraced already as our theme, and the green and orange shirts are coming in really handy right now, because if you come around to Hopkins, it's one of the ways we keep track of which day it is. We alternate our t-shirts at Hopkins. So Hopkins this year, we have 3 goals. Our first goal is building on a lot of the work that Lauren and Ann already spoke about, so I'm not going to repeat too much of that, but we still are very much focused on social emotional learning at Hopkins School. And as the middle grades, I talk a lot about being the middle child, and our children are really moving past that stage where they're really closely watched and supported by adults and starting to move towards independence. And so a lot of the work we're doing right now is managing that. How do we help students start to build independence, executive functioning skills? It's a huge part of moving into 4th and 5th grade. How do I manage all of those things I need to do in my life? And that's both emotional and also academic. And it's also very much social. We see a lot of 4th graders who are having the kind of social relationships that we might have thought 7th and 8th graders were having a few years ago. So if you look at our success criteria, there's a couple of pieces that I really want to highlight here. First off, we're continuing that work in social justice that started at the younger grades. At our level, we're going to be working with both Grant Hightower. Grant Hightower is a consultant that will be starting actually with the 5th grade social studies teachers, and then continuing more work with the middle school and high school students, and I think they might be speaking more about that. At our level, it's really going to be working with those social studies teachers, because 5th grade, the curriculum covers both Civil War and civil rights. It's the first introduction in a deeper level to both of those topics. And that's new in DESE's social studies scope and sequence over the last social studies curriculum frameworks change. It goes all the way to civil rights. And we feel it's very important to help students understand these are not just events that happened in the past, but there's a lot of impact in what's happening right now in the world. And we recognize how important it is to have grade-appropriate, age-appropriate conversations that are sensitive. So the work with Grant Hightower this year is going to be really looking at those standards and helping teachers understand how to facilitate conversations that make everyone in the room feel safe. We think that's really important work. And so this year, the work is really going to focus on the teachers who have to facilitate those conversations. The other piece of that work in social justice is what Lauren was talking about, the work with Blackprint, and that is the work with the adult educators, again, examining their own bias and discussing topics like anti-racism. So that was one of the first things I really wanted to focus. The other, and I'll talk more about this in the curriculum areas, is the integration of Schoology. So we recognize in this model, especially as we move into 4th and 5th grade, that so much of our social emotional learning has to be embedded in curriculum. Lauren and Ann talked about the importance of our interactive read-alouds. We have found those to be incredibly relevant. And the themes within Fontes and Pinnell's interactive read-alouds, they cover both genres of reading, so our librarian will be going through those interactive read-alouds, but they also cover reading topics. Those will be worked on within the reading curriculum. And then all of the teachers at Hopkins, actually during morning meetings, will be integrating other themes that are all different topics within social emotional learning. We started this last spring, and it includes, so perseverance is one. And within the perseverance realm of those interactive read-alouds. Last spring, they read books. There was a book about the Japanese internments, for example, but they're all done through read-alouds. So it's text, picture books that are actually at a complexity that many of our students couldn't access to read those picture books on their own, but we read them as class discussions and facilitate it. And so a lot of our work with the interactive read-alouds, how do we figure out to use things like Schoology and build and weave social emotional learning into all of our curriculum. The next item, if we want to go on to goal 2, I think those are the biggest highlights. Going into literacy, both literacy and math, one of the biggest areas that we're going to be focusing on this year is technology. Technology integration, the new learning management system starts at grade 4, and it is going to be a huge amount of the work that our teachers at Hopkins are going to be taking on. I talked about executive functioning. This really fits with social emotional learning because our students, the PBIS work that we're doing, go hand in hand with technology. So Lauren and Ann talked a lot about the routines and structures we put into place for learners at school. The learning online is really where we see a lot of the challenges. And this carries over into their ability then to access the curriculum. So our learning management system, Schoology, is going to help us push out work, but that's a huge amount for kids to manage. So there's a lot of connection between the SEL goal and then our academic goals, and a lot of it's around how do we use technology. It's a great tool, but managing it, all of the things you have to do and keep track of, looking at that big list of items that I have to work on at home. So figuring out ways that we can use Schoology that's accessible to a 9-year-old who this is the first time that they're being expected to then also manage some of their home learning, both in literacy and math, is going to be a big piece. So our teachers are working on how do we set up both the work that we're doing in school. So we're focusing on teacher-driven work and independent work, and that fits with our hybrid model of learning very well, and we're trying to help teach our students how that system would work, which will build on once we get past the pandemic. Because the reality is, as you move through the grades, your expectation of independent work builds each year. So a lot of our literacy work will be focused on that, and what we're using in terms of curriculum to teach from is all of our Fontes and Pinnell classroom materials. We've purchased it over the last 2 years, and we're continuing to integrate that very fully into our curriculum. The other big challenge that we have this year is integrating our guided reading in this hybrid model. It's a bit of a challenge to figure out and wrestle with. We have these students who come every day, we have these students who come every other day, and then how do we manage the remote learners? And I would say that literacy instruction in the remote model is by far the most challenging. And that's echoed in the math. And I would say the PBIS work, helping understand rules, expectations, it's the remote learning that we're having the most challenges. I feel like kids are coming in, following the routines in terms of keeping 6 feet, putting on the masks, understanding social distancing a lot better than they're understanding the rules for appropriate online learning. And so that's where a lot of our work is going to have to be. But in literacy, I think, how do we make sure that those materials that we have that are so rich and wonderful with Fontes and Pinnell materials, how do they translate into our online learning environment for those remote learners? If you go to our third goal, this would be our math goal, and we're continuing to really focus on differentiation in math. We know that our students come from very different backgrounds and understandings of math. Math is one of those areas that students' trajectories are very different. How quickly you can take in the information, acquire it, and then be ready to move on to the next skills. And so how do we incorporate that at the elementary level in a grade-appropriate, age-appropriate way to make sure that students who need extensions, enrichment, are really getting to full depth that they deserve as much as our other students at the other end are getting a chance to get reteaching as well. So balancing all of that has always been one of the biggest challenges in math, and really one of the areas we have to continue to wrestle with. And we will continue to work on how can we use and take this very powerful learning management system that we've been given to help manage that. I think we have a great opportunity with Schoology to help develop our differentiation for math. So I see that as a great opportunity. Already our math teams at each grade level are finding it very powerful to do exactly that we can keep heterogeneous classrooms, but we'll have an opportunity to very much differentiate it through that learning management system. We're still very much in the early stages, but I believe my math teachers feel that this is one of the most important things for them to work on this year, is how do we channel Schoology to help us deliver what each child needs in math. That's it. I'm done. I'm happy to take questions. I was trying to keep it fast. We all committed to doing nice presentations. We had a very long agenda, and it may have been a little bit of a challenge, so did I keep it shorter?
Do you have any questions for Mrs. Joe?
I do have a question. Thank you very much, and thanks for going fast, too. But I do have a question going back to executive functioning for this age group, right? So obviously it's important as adults and high school students, and in middle school, there's a lot of focus on that, too. But can you help me, as a non-education expert, understand what's the age-appropriate expectation for executive functioning of 10 and 11, 9, 10, 11-year-olds?
Well, first of all, there's a huge range, right?
Yeah.
We know that executive functioning in a typical person doesn't totally develop till 23, 24, which is why you see college students who can't manage their time very well, right? And certainly adults struggle with it too. But 9, 10, and 11 is where, especially right now, what we're seeing the challenge in a remote learning environment. So students on their home learning days. Schoology, you have all your assignments there. How do you figure out where to go first? How do you take this massive work and say, okay, I need to prioritize, this is what I'm going to do now, and how long is it going to take me? The sense of time at 9 and 10 is not very well developed.
Right.
So we actually frequently find that that's one of the first places we have to start. Schedules, timers, and computers have great opportunities to help us manage that, but just the amount of information overload, how do you weed out and start with small amounts and chunk things? That's,
right.
as a special educator, those were some of the things we talked about all the time. How do I chunk this massive amount of work that I see so it doesn't feel completely overwhelming and then I can't do anything?
Now, are you talking about the teachers being able to chunk for the student, or I just want to make sure that we have the right expectation of the students?
Absolutely.
And you're saying we're seeing challenges, and I don't know if you're seeing challenges, meaning that students are having a hard time doing this, so we need to teach them better how to do it, in which case I would say, let's be careful to have the right expectations, right? Or are you saying it's challenging for the teachers to chunk it in a way that's digestible to the age level?
The teachers do a very good job of chunking it.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is in the hybrid model, where we're talking about students on a home learning day,
Right.
that we can push out excellent work online, but how do you figure out what to do and when? Because the expectations on how much learning you do. And that's where we have to differentiate it out. And the other area in terms of that time management and executive functioning is the ability to attend to instruction. We know that students at our age level, 5-minute chunks is what they really say is the maximum. So if you're going to deliver instruction to a child and you have it go much longer than 5 minutes, you've lost them. They're not going to retain that. So how do we as teachers do exactly what you're talking about? Make sure that we're doing meaningful, small chunks of information out so that their capacity to take it in is there.
Okay, all right.
So it's a combination, but
Yeah.
in this year, with the challenges of the pandemic, that's a bigger partnership with families.
Got it. This is it's always a challenge, but this year it's even more of a challenge for our students to be able to perform in your grade level because of the executive functioning expectations.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say that the remote classrooms have the biggest challenge with
Right.
this. And we've been open about that all summer. But I've had the opportunity to go into a lot of our remote classrooms over the last couple days, and again, there are about 25 children in those classes, up to 26 and 27, and when you're talking about looking at a screen all day, what we did in the spring in terms of the amount of time was a small chunk. Attending on a screen is very different than being in a classroom environment where the teacher can come over and say, I noticed that you've been looking off in the distance. Over the computer, the teacher's not there to do the same kind of tap. And even with social distancing, it's still different in a classroom. I would say that's where I'm noticing, and my teachers are sharing, one of the biggest challenges right now. We can't be there to help them attend in the same way. And that's where we have to partner with families.
Yeah, it's not ideal, right?
So, a couple comments.
Sure.
First, I keep talking about my son. My youngest son, a different school district, when he was diagnosed with ADHD, we were told that around 4th grade is when kids with ADHD really start having a lot of trouble and failing. And at the school he was at, there was really no change in how he was, like, the teachers were taught or how they supported this change into 4th grade. And so I love hearing all this talk about executive function and worrying about how to make sure that this transition is being guided correctly. That's amazing to me, especially with all the rest of the work that's going on right now. And also, I think I am, amazed isn't quite the word, but I'm really honestly grateful that these teachers who already have so much to do are willing to take on the role of facilitating safe spaces. Like in my company, that's, diversity has become a huge thing, and facilitating safe spaces is one of the hardest things anybody can do. And so, these teachers taking on a task that big during all of this as well, I think is remarkable. And I really, really appreciate that it's part of the goals and that it's in the curriculum, and that, once again, they're taking on such a huge challenge because it is so hard to find a safe space for everybody in a classroom.
Very true. Thank you.
So I just want to echo back what I said. I don't want to neglect the Hopkins teachers and paras that I know that they're all doing a phenomenal job. I also want to kind of go back to what you had said about Hopkins being kind of the middle child, which is kind of true in some ways, but it also highlights, I think, a strength of our district, which is that when I think back, because I have a child in your building, looking at Mrs. Carver and Mrs. Dubois, and I think about when my child was in those buildings, developmentally, such a different experience, but also Hopkins kind of steps up nicely in terms of the natural progression towards middle school and then high school, but the expectation I can see in what's being taught with respect to executive functioning is really, I think, important for all of those kids, but it noticeable. So,
yep, and I think we're taking all of the work we've done with Landmark over the years on executive functioning, all of that on building a physical binder, and how do you translate it into the computer-based world. And so we already had a good basis, and how do you help students put things into folders in their own brains, and whether it's on a computer or in a binder. And so that's really the kind of the process we go through for that executive functioning. But I'd agree, that whole step up, it's gradual. Elmwood and Marathon, students have one primary teacher. By 4th grade, they're doing some of that switching of teachers. 5th grade, they have 2 teachers departmentalized a little bit more. So everything, I think, gets stepped up, and we do it in a very conscious way to build to a high school experience.
And I would say that conscious pathway has improved over the years since I've been living in the district, and just noticing from my oldest child to my youngest, who's now at Hopkins, the difference, the flow is much, I think, easier between the buildings.
I think that there's a lot of collaboration and communication between the 5 principals here. We work very closely all the time.
It shows, so thank you.
I just wanted to thank your teachers. Even though this happened a few months ago, a group of the Hopkinton learning specialists drove over to our house to see my son, who'd been in isolation for 3 months, not seen another kid. And it really just changed our lives. having those adults come to our house and give him a gift and show him love, because now we're leading these remote lives which are so disconnected from humanity. And a year ago, if we talked about remote days, we would have scoffed at them. And now we're acting like kids should know how to do this, to interact with a machine. So I thank you for your humanity, which has trickled down to your teachers.
I have fantastic teachers.
Yeah,
I
you
would
do.
agree. Paraprofessionals, everyone at Hopkins works very hard. And though I talked about executive functioning and the challenges, on the flip side, what I would say is that our students are incredibly resilient. Since day one, the joy that they've brought back into Hopkins and the teachers, adults are struggling a lot more than kids. And I think that that's really important to emphasize. I'm having joyous days at Hopkins School. I love going to work again, and it's because the kids are back there. It's really fun. I mean, we're playing music. The cafeteria does not look the same, but they're having fun in the cafeteria. There's happy chatter everywhere. When I go online and I'm in those remote classrooms, the kids are happy, they're engaged. I can tell they've connected with their teachers. That is a testament to the hard work of the adults, even as we're all struggling with our own challenges from the pandemic. It's not trickling down into what the teachers and the educators and the paraprofessionals and the cafeteria workers are doing for the children of Hopkinton. They are working incredibly hard, and you can see that in the joys of the kids. So I think that's really important to leave you with, is that kids are so happy to be back at school in whatever form it is, and we're happy to have them.
Thank you.
I'll just add my thank you, echoing what they said. I really appreciate how targeted to the needs of this year you've been able to make this school improvement plan. I mean, clearly a lot of thought has gone into this to address the needs in front of us. I also really liked, I think you added a personal development section to your report card, which I thought was great. I really like that. Recognizing that is a growth, that's an accomplishment, watching as kids personally grow and develop.
Yeah, and we will continue that is something that the students reflect on throughout the year, because again, becoming aware of yourself as a learner is really that critical part of building executive function.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, that'd be great. They're all stacked.
Thank you, Ms. Parson.
Mr. Howard.
It's great service. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me to talk about the Hopkinton Middle School School Improvement Plan. As I think you all know, that the school improvement plans are something that are developed. It's a collaborative effort between students, at the middle school anyway, students, teachers, and parents. The school improvement plan starts usually in October, and we spent a lot of time throughout the course of the year pulling that together. So I wanted to acknowledge the people who took part in this. Parents, Christina Perloff, Allison Murphy, Lee Burns, Alexis Miller. Teachers, Jane Lassard, Shannon Oles, and Rebecca Bate. And we had 4 students, Reese Inarante, Nate Schneider, Reggie Vittorio, and Monar Chaudhry. And it certainly was a very interesting year to develop a school improvement plan. Actually, at one point I had to look back and I said, I think that's the group from 2 years ago, because it seemed so long ago that we did the school improvement plan. But nonetheless, that was our school improvement plan, our school council from last year. So I want to acknowledge the work that they did. So we have 3 goals this year. The first is our changing needs, and this really focuses on enrollment growth and our student needs. Currently, this year we have 925 students in our building, or that are enrolled in grades 6 through 8, I should say. And in FY20, that was 859 students. For next year, we're projected at 954 students. And so I think everybody here knows the enrollment growth that's happening in Hopkinton. And so we are having to look really closely at our space as we begin to run out of space in the building, and in certain programs realize that we need larger spaces. So things like our intensive special needs program, our library, our START short-term transition program, our Empower social, emotional, and behavior program, drama, engineering, and music are all things that we're examining if they are in the right location. And so in order to do that, we are developing a needs assessment, working with Dr. Kavanaugh, and also a building task force to make recommendations on what makes the most sense for those classrooms, those spaces, and those programs, looking at hallways, lockers, last year when we had all the students in the building, we were running into a lot of issues in the hallways with transitions from class to class because we are on the same schedule, grades 6 through 8, and so there would be certain times when we get pretty significant bottlenecks, kids going out to the bus, coming in from the bus. And so when we get back to that point where we have all the students in the building, those are certainly some things that we'll have to pay really close attention to, and we'll begin to do that work this year. Our second goal is around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this is really about advancing and embracing diversity in our school. We have three major tenets of that. The first is to develop strategies that will respond to incidents of bias and discrimination in our school. We want to improve the mechanisms for reporting incidents of bias. What we're hearing from our students, although, and I think I've talked about it here before, we feel as though we are an open administration and welcome students to come and talk to us about situations that occur. What we're realizing is that not every student feels comfortable coming to the office to report something like that. And so we are working to offer a range of ways which students can report a situation to us. That's not just walking into the office. And thirdly, and I think extremely important, is examining our curriculum, our materials, our resources, and school events so that they are reflective of the diverse identities and experiences of our students. And we're looking at a variety of ways, and Vanessa mentioned a couple of these that we are also engaged in. So we're working with Grant Hightower, who's a leader in diversity, equity, inclusion. He's going to be meeting with our 8th grade students. Chris Ocampo, our new assistant principal, was working with Grant today to kind of define that and identify that. We're also working with Blackprint. Jen Suker, who is our Director of English Language Acquisition, Equity and Access, has been a tremendous resource and help in pulling all these pieces together. And we have an equity, diversity, and inclusion task force at grades 6 through 12 for the time being that is Chris Ocampo and Laura Tice, who's the high school assistant principal, have been working together along with Jen and Jen Parson, and working with teachers at both the schools to accomplish all these things together and then individually working at our school level to examine those pieces. And then our final goal is around student engagement. And so when we talk about student engagement, we're talking about increasing the engagement of our students, and so that's in the typical school year, but it's also in this unique school year in which we find ourselves. We heard from a lot of students and a lot of teachers that the way we engaged students via Zoom last year wasn't ideal, and so we're working with our technology department. We had a professional development task force that worked over the summer to identify different ways that we can engage students and different tools that we can use that's not 30 kids on a Zoom call staring at the teacher and the teacher talking for 45 minutes. And so we've uncovered different ways. Schoology is one of those areas that Vanessa had mentioned earlier. So we're looking at increasing that engagement. On top of that is our social emotional learning goals. This year we started a Hiller Strong period of time in which we've recognized that our students always need some social emotional connection to our school, but especially in our current climate where they're coming to school every other day. Some of our students are not coming into school at all, and we have some students who are coming 5 days. And so our homeroom teachers are working with students in this period called Hiller Strong, where we're really trying to identify or develop that identity for our students in their cohorts. And finally, a couple of the pieces, we're working with Jessica Minahan, who's a behavior consultant. We did work with her as an entire staff last year. She's working with us again this year at working with ways that helping us on how we can support our students with some behavioral concerns. And Dr. Zaleski has connected us with Kim Kuziak, who's working with our counselors at improving how all of our counseling programs go together. So I mentioned Empower earlier, START, and just the Tier 1 counseling services that we offer to our students as well. And those are our 3 goals for this current year.
Don't go away. Any questions or comments for Mr. Keller?
So, as a data scientist, one of my favorite talks I ever went to was about a hospital that figured out how to move departments around based on the traffic, like what went where and who went. So I am super excited, weirdly, to hear about this needs analysis about the movement in the school, and I can't wait to hear more about how you're doing the analysis and what's going on. Like, that's that's super cool.
Thank you. Well, I might need that reference, by the way, too.
Oh, yeah, I can totally give it to you. And then I was going to say, obviously, the social justice piece, I love that you're bringing in the consultant, but I also love that you're working with the high school to create a flow there, because when I worked previously in a board of trustees for a high school, one of the things that I learned is that middle schools is where kids tend to fall behind, right? It's where the strata starts to happen, especially with underrepresented children. So I like the fact that you are creating this flow and making sure that there's a connection between the high school and the middle school, and that the kids aren't just moving from grade 8 to grade 9 and kind of into this completely new experience without a good transition plan. So, yeah, this is really great.
Thank you for sharing that.
I wanted to ask, are you seeing, well, first, excellent, thank you, and also to echo what we said to the previous presenter, because we're a district where our K through 8 is divided among so many schools, only 2 or 3 years per school, the work you do with the school before you and after you as a principal is so important, I think. And I guess in that regard, I wanted to ask if you see the same challenge in middle school students around executive functioning due to increased expectation of computer and online time because of the environment we're in. And are you seeing students prepared for that, or is that a challenge, and what's the right age to expect that kind of autonomy?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
And I'm just wondering how this pandemic is forcing our kids to do unnatural things that they're not developmentally ready for.
Yes.
And it's clear that that would pose a challenge to the teachers and principals, but how are we accommodating that? How are we dealing with that?
So, I mean, I think some of that we're still sorting through, right? And we're still trying to figure pieces of that out. So earlier Vanessa mentioned landmark schools, and so we've been working with Landmark, I want to say, for 5 years now, and that started at Hopkins and the middle school. We had a presenter come in and speak to both groups, and so we have developed this transitional program from 4 through 8 to help students develop some of those executive functioning skills, and it looks different at each grade level, and our goal is to, by the time they get to 8th grade or completing 8th grade, for them to say, okay, I've utilized different systems, and now I'm prepared to choose something that works best for me. Like, you forced me to do this, and now I'm ready to, I understand what works best for my learning style. Mm-hmm. In the digital environment, that's definitely been a struggle. So when we had to kind of drop everything in March and turn to this, that has definitely been a struggle. Our teachers felt that struggle, our students felt that struggle, we know parents felt that struggle. And so I know one of the reasons, a major reason for going to Schoology was to help with having things in too many places.
That's great.
Yeah, so we're still working through a lot of things, but I think what we're finding is that our teachers are working really hard to keep things organized and keep students in the right place. We're not having Zoom links in 18 different locations.
Right.
Having said that, I know Meg actually mentioned the last time I was here about the school supplies, and so things like that we're still working through, and so we've had a lot of parents donate things for under the desks, and that's kind of one of the things we're working through, is to help students keep that stuff organized so they're not putting all their stuff into a very unorganized backpack. But that's something that we're working on as teachers, and so we've built in time this year in what we call Hiller Block for teachers to be working with students to help them stay organized. And again, that looks different at each grade level. But
okay, good. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that you're making the accommodations of, it's not just about teaching the executive functioning, because that develops at a certain time frame, but also there are ways you can make the delivery more simple and streamlined, like all in one place on Schoology.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Just want to say thank you for all you're doing, and I'm glad you're extending the social emotional goals too. And it sounds as if you have a very close relationship with all the principals, so well done.
Thank you, Mike.
I echo what I said to the principals who went before you, but just a huge thank you for all of your staff, your teachers, your paras, and everybody who's supporting the middle schoolers as they're going into this. I appreciate some of the additional information on Schoology from both you and Vanessa. And I love the notion of the Hill or Strong in looking at where kids are in different modalities of some in school, not at all, some in school 5 days, some days and some not, so.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, I think Vanessa said it really well. Like, it's definitely seeing the kids in school, seeing the kids in the remote classes, those that are remote. It's been really good to have them there. They are, we're hearing really positive things from the kids, and the teachers are working really hard to create that really positive experience. So it's been a pleasure to be back, and we're thrilled to be where we are.
So do they all come together in homeroom for a little bit? Is that how the Hill or Strong works?
Yeah, so at the middle school, as you may recall, we're all in cohorts, so they are staying together all day long. So homeroom is a little bit longer this year because we have our staggered arrival. So yeah, so we have a homeroom period at the end of the day. There is a Hill or block because 6th grade begins to get dismissed at 1:30. So when academics end at 1:30, 7th and 8th grade has their Hill or Strong at the end of the day, and then 6th grade has it more at the beginning of the day.
And do the remote kids connect in?
The remote kids are working with the remote
teachers.
All remote kids have a remote homeroom teacher.
Yeah.
And so the remote homeroom teacher is working with the kids doing the Hill or Strong during that period.
That's great. I love it. I love the student engagement. I mean, I know that so much of your focus for so long has been, connecting the students on multiple levels to the school so that they can then be motivated to engage and be successful. And it's got to be very challenging in this environment, but to continue to keep that focus is wonderful. And, I won't echo everything else, which I would if I could, but I want to observe your time. But I'll also say that I remember when our biggest concern was enrollment. And I feel like we've stopped talking. Oh my gosh, we just want to have a crowded school again, it'd be so nice. But I'm really glad that you've kept your eye on the prize, because I remember looking back at the capacity study and the color coding and the areas that were red, and I know that there was trouble on the horizon for the middle school in terms of crowding in different places, so I'm really glad that you've kept that
Thank you.
in focus.
Yeah, I never thought I would say I would look forward to crowded hallways again. But.
I know, right?
I definitely have noticed when I have gone into the middle school, when you've been at full capacity, that when they're passing in the halls, it's like a game of Frogger trying to get across.
Yeah, there's no question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The one whose school day starts the earliest,
Of course. Sleep here, so.
Hello, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you all. Good evening. I know I say this every year when I get to go last. It's always a pleasure to be able to listen to my principal colleagues and hear all the great things that they're doing at their schools. And I feel very fortunate to be part of this group. It's a very talented group. And there's a consistent approach. As you'll see in our goals here, there's a lot of consistency across the district, but I don't know if that happens everywhere. So I think that's really special here in Hopkinton. So at the high school, we have 3 goals, and all of our goals are 2-year goals. We put a time cap on them. We try to accomplish them within that time frame. So each one of these goals is actually in the 2nd year of the 2 years. So some of this is going to be repetitive for many of you here. I do also want to thank the school council, like Mr. Keller mentioned. This school council at the high school is 27 people, so I don't want to list all. We'll be here for a while. But it's a group of teachers, administrators, parents, and students. It's a wonderful group. Our goals also were helped be created by our NEASC committee. I know many of you are familiar with NEASC. It's the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They do an accreditation process every 10 years. And in the 8th year of that, which was 2 years ago, they come in and do an assessment. And part of their recommendations fed into many of our goals here. So there's going to be a lot of crossover, not only with the work with school council, but with our NEAS visit, which is coming up this April, we're hearing. It might get pushed back, who knows if it's going to happen, could be virtual, but that's when our accreditation 10-year visit will be. So our first goal here is the vision of the graduate goal, and I think we're all aware that we have our own core values and beliefs of learning. You see some of them on the banner over here. We also have a mission statement, but we also really wanted to dig a little bit deeper, and this is a big push with NEASC as well, to really kind of identify and define those transferable skills, the knowledge, the understandings, and the dispositions that are necessary for future success. I think our students do a wonderful job in the classroom, but there are some things we can work with them outside of the classroom on. And so we met a number of times with our school council We have a committee here at the high school that also is focusing on the vision of the graduate. And this year, it's a 4-year process to implement the vision of the graduate. So last year was our first year. We made great progress. Obviously, it slowed down a little bit with the closure of school. But we identified some areas through some feedback and some surveys from different stakeholders, parents, students, and staff. And we focused on a few, such as self-management, social awareness, critical thinking, self-efficacy, growth mindset, and effective communication. So those are the 6 what we call competencies that we're going to be looking for. And then within those, we need to come up with descriptors. So this year, in year 2, is when we talk a little bit about what those look like in the classroom. We get the teachers involved, we get students, parents as well. And year 3 is when we talk about how we're going to measure it and how we're going to report out on those and how it's going to look within our curriculum in instruction and in assessment. And then in year 4 is the implementation of the vision of the graduate and how we're going to report that out. So it is kind of a long process. We're excited about the work. As you see here, there's different timelines. Some of it obviously was slowed down a little bit, but we have come up with our 6 competencies, and so this year we'll be focusing a little bit more on what those actually look like in practice. So that's our first goal at the high school around the vision of the graduate. The second goal is, as you see, very similar to other schools, is around social emotional learning. This is a focus area. We've had a goal around SEL at the high school since 2015, and we'll have a goal in our school improvement plan as long as you'll have me in this role. It's so important. The social, emotional, mental, and physical well-being of our students is always at the forefront of what we do. We've created Hiller Days from these goals. We've created our homework-free weekends. The START program started from an SEL goal back in 2015. We were making some real good momentum on identifying our schedule and figuring out ways that we might be able to improve that, which was a flex block schedule, in which we had some real momentum. We had over 95% of the staff wanting to go in that direction, which is pretty impressive. It's tough to get 95% of people to focus on anything. And the students were really looking forward to it too. Unfortunately, that took a little bit of a hit with COVID, and I think we'll need to revisit that. We've gone back to our traditional schedule, but we will look into different ways to create a better schedule for students to have more of a kind of a healthy balance. Obviously, I think we all know that anxiety, depression, stress levels are really high, and so we need to do a great job of working with our students. We have a wonderful counseling department. We also partnered with Challenge Success, which I know many of you are familiar with. We had a grant from the Mental Health Collaborative in town to be able to bring Challenge Success on, which is an organization out of Stanford University that kind of helps schools kind of redefine their definition of success and help students kind of find happiness and joy in school. A lot of data is out there that kids are just doing school, so how do we make them really enjoy it? Also with the social emotional goal, similar to what Alan and Vanessa talked about, we'll be also working with Grant Hightower. And as you see up here, we are, in this year, starting an equity, diversity, and inclusivity task force. And Laura Tice, our new assistant principal, will be working with the middle school. They've already had a number of meetings. We're hoping in November to bring some students as part of that meeting as well, and really kind of have that conversation around social justice. When we surveyed the students as part of the Challenge Success program, to kind of get a sense of what are the stressors. Obviously, college was a big one, future planning was a big one, but they also talked about kind of the inequities that happen at the Hopkins High School, and some of the bias that goes on. So those were some things that really hit home to us, and we had a town hall forum in May virtually for our students to talk about racism and systemic racism and social justice. And it was just kind of the beginning of the conversation that we're having at the high school. And we're always looking for ways to incorporate everyone's experience within our curriculum. And so those are going to be some focus areas for ours, in addition to the schedule when it comes to our SEL goal. So that's our second goal. And our third goal, similar to the middle school as well, is around enrollment and growth. We have this year, we have actually less than 1,200 students, but next year we'll be above that again. We have a big incoming 8th grade class next year. We are at a point that every classroom in the building is being used every period. I think with the hybrid model, it's been so different. It's been pretty quiet, and there hasn't been nearly as many kids in the hallway. And I think the teachers are enjoying those smaller classes. But when we do have everybody back in the building, we are pretty maxed out in terms of capacity. So obviously we know the construction project that's going on, which is great. We are excited to have 6 additional classrooms. We think that will help. But we're always trying to make sure that we're ensuring equitable class sizes. Ideal class sizes are anywhere between 18 and 24, and that's where the best instruction happens. And we were seeing a lot of our classes at 27, 28, some in the 30s. And so we have, I appreciate, I know I came recently and asked for some staffing, which you were very generous to give that to us. And I think that's always something that we need to kind of keep in our mindset, is to make sure the class sizes don't grow and get the proper amount of staffing for our students, especially as the enrollment continues to grow. So obviously the construction is a big part of that. When NEAS came for their visit and they did a walkthrough, one of the biggest concerns they had was space and class sizes for the school. So that was why we made sure we had this as one of our goals. So, and obviously in addition to these goals, I think when we have started the year in this pandemic, our focus has been on obviously safety and the new protocols and, ensuring that we have high quality instruction in our remote and hybrid models. And so those are in addition to the work that we're doing here. Some of this hasn't started yet this year, but will hopefully shortly once we start to kind of get our feet underneath us for the year. So those are the 3 goals at the high school, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Let's just go down the line. Leah, do you have any questions or comments?
I feel like I just continue to say the things I've said. Like, I'm very excited about the social justice, the task force, the thought about how to bring it into the curriculum, the very mindful, careful way this is being done. It's very exciting. I am so glad that you're focused on the growth of the school itself. Once again, considering this year and COVID and the huge distraction that we've had, this still remains one of the biggest issues we have to tackle.
Yep.
So, yeah, I really appreciate all of this. I appreciate how much your teachers are working to cover all of these different formats. I'm just really grateful and amazed by the goals and by the actual implementation that's already happening. So thank you.
Yeah, I've got some questions. One, I wouldn't say it for the younger grades, but for high school, I guess my question would be, are there any learnings from, this COVID situation where we've been forced to do these online models? And I'm thinking about the capacity issues in the school, right? Mm-hmm. Is there anything positive coming out of this forced experimentation of online delivery of education at the high school level that might actually be an ingredient in the capacity challenge you face?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, we have had students kind of take online classes now for a while, not necessarily with our teachers, but we've had encouraged students to do that for space issues. And I think, I've had a conversation actually just today with a few teachers who are doing one section remote and then a number of classes here in the building in person. And they made a comment how they're really enjoying their remote classes. One, they get to see their faces, and the students are really focused. I think in the spring it was a challenge for everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it was everybody's best self in that time frame. But as we were preparing for the school year, we prepared for the possibility of being remote. And I think teachers really bought into that and have some really good engaging lessons in there. And I think there's a lot that has come up that I think when we are all back, we can still utilize some remote instruction, maybe remove some kids out of the building for capacity issues. And I don't think we'll skip a beat. I think we've really put some things in place and measures in place that the instruction is really high quality.
Right, okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we may find post this, if there is such thing, that you are able to deliver higher quality in some cases, right, through the online.
That's a great point, Joe. Thanks for bringing that up, because I was thinking that at least the pandemic has bought us some time to think about space, but maybe we'll envision the classroom very differently in the future, especially for high school students. I'm so glad you're still doing the Challenge Success program. Are you still incorporating something from Keefe Tech into the curriculum?
Yeah.
Some vocational?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead, yeah. You want to talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, actually, as you were speaking, Joe, that we are working very closely with the high school and under Evan's leadership to provide internship job shadowing, work study kinds of opportunities. In some of those cases, when we really get that rolling, students might want to take advantage of more online courses and remote learning to kind of give them more flexibility in their schedule to get to some of the workplace opportunities. But yes, to answer your question, Meg, we are continuing to work with some of the labor market trends with Evan's guidance staff, with some nice PD that they had last year that they'll be sharing out with their colleagues this year, and continuing to work. This year, we're just about to post for a work study coordinator and a dual enrollment coordinator as well, so we can continue to grow those programs at the high school level, definitely under Evan's direction.
That's great. I didn't mean to steer us away from what you said. And just thank you for your very wonderful focus on student growth outside the classroom, too. Really grateful for all you do. Thank you.
So, as you were talking, it occurred to me that we've had this same core group of principals now for like 5 years or so, and what a valuable asset that's been to our district. Previously, it seems like I have 4 kids. They had all had different experiences because of that, where this is all really stabilized so nicely, and so appreciative of all of you and your staff as well. I know that the high school has had unique challenges with the scheduling and all of this, the hybrid and the remote and the pivoting and whatnot, but from everything that I have heard and seen, it's been an incredible amount of work and pretty incredible results on a short timeline. Just also, like Meg, I really am appreciative of the project success, challenge success, and just the way that you're looking at the different stressors, and I'm thinking back to 2 years ago when they had the audit and how responsive you were to the different points that came up in that, and not realizing, we're going in to doing it in April again. I imagine we're probably in a much stronger place than we were 2 years ago, and that was even a pretty good report.
We're I wouldn't say we're excited for the visit, because it's pretty time-consuming and there's a lot of work that goes into it, but we're excited about the work that we've done towards the goals to show them that we've done. So, yeah, it's in challenge success. Not to get into that too much, because I know we've talked about it a lot, but we made such great momentum. We had faculty meetings, we had parent presentations, we had a day right before Thanksgiving break. There was a challenge success day where we talked a little bit about the stressors, and it was just, we had some real good momentum going that I'm hoping we can get back once we kind of get back to, like I said, not normal, but our new normal.
New normal. And it's appreciative that in town we have a resource like Mental Health Collaborative to be a resource.
We're very thankful to them.
And with regard to the stressors, so happy to hear that you're looking at some of the inequities and bias and some of the issues that we have seen bubble up from experiences our students have had, and really working to improve those for our kids. So thank you.
Going last is tough because all the greatness has already been shared. But I will say, I was wondering if you could just read those 6 qualities of the vision of the graduate.
Oh, sure. It's self-management, social awareness, critical thinking, self-efficacy, growth mindset, and effective communication. So
I love those. I love those. And I can just say, I have 2 fairly recent graduates, and those are the skills that they need, like today.
Yep,
It's the self-efficacy just those 6 are phenomenal.
And a lot of those are talked a lot about in the SEL world in terms of focusing on those. And then there's the critical thinking, effective communication. We kind of meld together with those. And so, we're excited. We think that covers a lot, and I think that we're excited about the work kind of breaking down each one of those and what it might look like in the classroom.
As human beings, to have those in your toolkit, like those qualities, it's just huge for life success. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited that when all of you guys came up, it was either, oh, well, you're going to hear more about this later, or as you just heard from, there's this continuity that we keep bringing up that is just really remarkable. And I think, when people talk about the different things that make Hopkinton such a phenomenal place, I think that continuity with you all sort of working as, a very tight team really is one of the huge success factors for us. So I really, really, really appreciate that. And it just comes through so naturally when we get to see you all together and hear you talk. It just feels great. I feel just so pleased with everything that you guys are all doing and so grateful.
Yeah, like I said, I'm grateful to be part of it. I admire the work that they do, and I enjoy spending the time with them, so it's a nice combination. All the central office principals, it's a great group.
So it's late, so I'm sure you all want to go, so just thank you so much, and please, again, you've heard from everybody, but please extend our gratitude to your staff and your paras and the cafeteria workers, and, I mean, everybody. It takes a whole huge village to get us through every day, every minute, so we are really grateful. Thank you.
Team effort, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
We know that this is not easy, so
Thank you all.
Thanks.
That was so fun. I just don't even want to move on. Okay, so that was great.
Far less exciting.
We're not at the policy, we're going to do a middle school gift account. That's fun, too.
Okay. We have to approve these two as well, right?
Oh, do we need to approve these? Oh, we do. I would like to entertain a motion from someone to approve these fabulous school improvement plans.
So moved.
Motion from Meg.
Second.
Anybody want a second?
I think Leah did.
Sorry, second from Leah. All in favor? Aye. And we unanimously and enthusiastically support this work. Excellent. So the middle school gift account, Dr. Caddy.
Oh, goodness. Get to the right page. Should have been ready. Okay, so we are looking for the school committee to approve $3,748. It will go into the middle school gift account for Desire to Inspire, and this comes on behalf of Camp Eustace and Matt O'Connell, and it comes as a result of a marathon bib, so.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Discussion?
Fabulous.
Okay, any motion?
I move to accept the amount for the middle school.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Leah. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
And it passes. Thank you so much, and thank you to the marathon runner for being willing to raise this money for the schools. Really appreciate it.
Another one, we have, this one comes to us really from Mr. Hay. You'll remember that a couple of years ago, he started those musical instruments donations. So we have a flute to be donated by the Chevry family, and you can see that all of the paperwork is here and filled out and ready to go, so we're just looking for you to accept that gift.
I move to accept the flute.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Thank you for the flute. I love musical instruments. I love the band program, so this is great.
Okay, and then the next one, I am looking for you to approve some stipends. I think you'll remember when the athletic director, Mr. Cormier, was here a few weeks ago, he had talked about the fact that we wouldn't be having formal middle school sports this year. You know, there wouldn't be teams to compete against. And so one of the things that he has done, he explained to us when he was here last time, is he wants to put together these sort of cohorts of, sort of strength and conditioning teams. And so in an effort to be able to do that, the stipend for that is $1,400 for one of the cohorts, and we are just looking for your approval of those stipends.
Are there any questions or comments?
So is it just one cohort?
No, if you look at in your agenda, it will tell you that he is offering these stipends, and I think the cohort sizes are 10s, and they will all be socially distanced at 6 feet. So depending upon the enrollment, that's the number of coaches that he will hire. And I think that Mrs. Rodman can tell you, I think it's offset just by the coaching stipends that we would have had at the middle school if we had had formalized sports.
And do we have the number of enrollees?
I think it's 112 students. The last I knew it was is that correct? 112.
Did they change the cohort size? Was it originally 25, or am I making that up?
Oh, is it 25?
I think it's 25.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
So, just for clarity, how many of the stipends is it total? How many of these are we?
I'm not exactly sure that he put that in the proposal, but you might know the answer.
Yeah, I think the enrollment was around 100, so with a cohort of 25, that would be 4.
Okay.
And this is just for the fall?
Just for the fall.
Okay.
That's correct.
Amanda, is that number, didn't we discuss the amount when Rich was here a few meetings ago?
It was for assistant coaches
Oh,
when we
got it,
talked about
okay.
that amount. This is the different,
Yep.
this is the stipend.
I have a question. A parent was asking me about whether this was basically only for athletes in this situation, or whether like a special needs student could maybe enroll in this program and have support during the actual program. And so I was just curious about that.
Typically, when we have students with special needs who enroll in any of our athletic programs, so say it's a student who has a one-to-one paraprofessional or needs support, we typically provide that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think because the qualifications were very coach-oriented.
Right,
it
that's why.
appeared- I got tripped up myself because I was thinking more maybe really like CrossFit kinds of trainers who might not be sort of MIAA coaches. And I think the qualifications were a little confusing, but I think when I asked about that, I think Dr. Kavanaugh had said that if you do happen to have coach certification, I think it's preferred, not required. It just gives you that awareness of, the CPR training. There's sort of a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with that coach license that would be a good precursor to doing anything with fitness.
Just one final question for Ms. Rothermich is, should we be concerned, it's 1,400 times 4, but are we saying that it's offset from savings that we're seeing due to?
That's correct.
Okay.
We are not running fall middle school sports.
Right.
Can you remind me, are we charging the athletic fee for this program?
We are.
Okay.
And that's $75?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Joe,
I'll second.
second by Leah. All in favor to approve the strength and coaching and conditioning program coach stipend? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and it passes unanimously. That brings us to policy ACAB, I believe. If I missed something. This is the first reading of the harassment policy.
All right, so ACAB is a policy that we currently have, but it looks nothing like this. The policy working group, I think, reviewed ACAB as it existed many, many months ago. And I think we struggled a lot with it because there's harassment language that lives in the employee handbook. There were a few policies, I think, that kind of, danced around this topic. I think the policy that we currently have is a policy that we amended, once in a while and added some language to and never quite cleaned it up. So as we started to look at it, Meg, Leah, and I, it just felt so messy, for lack of a better word, that we went to the MASC website to see what their ACAB looked like, and theirs felt very sort of clean and crisp and streamlined. So we are suggesting that we just take the Hopkinton ACAB, eliminate it, and replace it with MASC. So that's what you see in your packet tonight.
With some adjustments that we made.
Yes.
Are the highlighted?
Highlighted.
Okay.
Yeah. The MASC one was very kind of school focused, so it was very much like if it affects your grade point average type things. And we were sitting there going, well, students can hide what is happening, get good grades, and still be having issues because of harassment. So we didn't want that to be like a delineation of whether a kid is actually being harassed. It didn't feel right. So we pulled out several things that had to do with academic performance or with behavior in classroom, et cetera, and tried to make it more about actual child or adult, but actual child or adult repercussions that they were having. And this feels very timely to me with the BIPOC at Hopkinton and some of the sort of spin-off Instagrams that have come up. I think this is really important. I know it's our first reading. I really hope that our community spends time reading this. I really want it to be right, because I think this informs everything, and this will help to guide the correct way to behave in those situations that we have been reading about.
Can I ask a question? There was one, I have a feeling you're going to say this is legalese, and this is how we say it, but I'm going to ask this anyway. In the second paragraph, when it lists all the different, the basis of, and then all the different kinds of harassment, the one thing that stuck out to me, and I know what you're going to say, but I'm saying it anyways, is the disability versus ability. And I feel like there is a lot of harassment that can happen based on any unique ability. If you happen to be very capable, you can, get a lot of harassment as when you are like not capable in a certain area. And so I was just kind of wishing that it was on the basis of ability, whether you have, an accessibility or a struggle with a basic ability. I think just ability in general, not just the lack of ability. So I don't know if it's possible to use a different word. You're going to say no. I can see the look.
We actually had this conversation
really?
as a policy working group. And what we did was we went back to all of the protected classes, that have been provided to us by our legal counsel and debated over it a little bit. I wonder if the group would be okay with leaving ability and disability in there sort of side by side. I don't know how we feel about that.
That would make me feel better, to be honest, because I think it just stuck out as just, I don't know. I mean, I was reading along and I'm like, yeah, I know that this is a word we use, but I think harassment often happens due to any unique ability as well, so. And I'm just curious, sorry, my other question was, with the highlighted sections, what was there? It was interesting to me that, especially down here it's in the student-to-student harassment, was it just interesting what you put there? I don't disagree with any of it, I just wasn't sure how you came up with that set of things. Like grades, achievements, and other school matter was an interesting subset of life for a student, so I wasn't sure.
So I have the MASC ACAB one that I'm reading from right now. So it had things, I think that third one, which is the one you're pointing to, right? It had implied or explicit threats concerning one's grades, achievements, or other school matter. So that's basically the same thing. Maybe we...
So you left it the same?
Yeah, it looks the same.
Oh, maybe we left it colored because we were
unsure.
Discussing.
Yeah, I think that was an area that we weren't maybe pleased with that language.
So once again, right, implicit or explicit threats concerning school-related matter. Well, even if you're in school, you can get implicit or explicit threats about numerous things, and it would be considered harassment. And so, yeah, I think that's why we highlighted it. I don't know that we had an answer for that.
I don't think we did.
Maybe just to revisit it. I don't know, I guess I think that was a good question.
One could argue that it should be broader, for example, not just school-related. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's kind of, in a way, it sort of captures it above and on the basis of all these different things, but then we specifically highlighted that, and it confused me. So I know it's just a first reading, but that's all.
So is the highlight, was your thought to take that part out? After the implicit or explicit threats to then end it there and take out the concerning one's grades, achievements, is that?
I think so. I think so.
It makes sense just based on.
It seems too pointed.
I think so.
Yeah.
Threats come in all sorts of colors, right?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
And can I just jump back to the disability-ability issue, Dr. Kavanaugh? I thought that when we talked, we decided that we had to use disability rather than ability because of the legal requirement.
Yes, I think we definitely have to put disability in there because that's part of that whole legal chunk that our legal counsel has asked us to go in, and anywhere there's a list of protected classes, that has to be the new list. But I don't necessarily know that it would be problematic to add ability to it. I just don't know that we should take disability out of it.
I think that's why we added, because athletic performance was not in there originally, and academic performance was not in there originally. So we put that as sort of this broad stroke of whether it's positive, whether you have a great ability in that or lesser ability in that.
But just like we talked about a minute ago on the other one, just in the same way, abilities aren't just academic and athletic.
Right.
As Amanda was saying, there are a whole host of things. I'd be in favor of seeing if it's problematic to add ability.
I
Keep
think-
disability, but add
yeah.
ability.
I like that idea too, because I mean, it could be your facility with social interactions, it could be, I mean, there's so many ways that kids are different, people are different, and when kids see differences, sometimes it results in some negative behavior, so I think a broad language, like you just said, would be sort of all-inclusive.
So, another question is, it says written, verbal, or physical harassment or abuse, this includes, and then that part is highlighted. Is the intention on the highlighted part to see if we need to add more, take more away, or what is the?
So in the mask copy, that said written, verbal, or physical, and then it had in parentheses, including texting, blogging, or other technological methods. So it was very weird. It was right after physical, and it just didn't fit very well.
We just changed the syntax.
So we just changed the sentence so that it would kind of look better.
Okay, so the highlight just it indicates that you've added that in from the MASC policy?
Yeah.
Is that?
That we changed it from the MASC policy, but it's still the same sort of wording in there.
Yep.
You took it out of the parentheses, and yeah. So this is going to sit for a little bit and percolate, and the community can read it, like, for at least till another meeting.
Yeah, I'm really, really hoping the community sits with this one. Like I said, we really want to get this right, so.
So the one thing I noted in reading through the first pass was it's significantly longer than a lot of our other policies, but I think necessarily so in this case. I think a lot of times we strive towards brevity, but I think this is a case where we need a little bit more to help everybody in our community to understand.
I think the one other place where it's kind of, I think we need to figure out balance is, due process protections are important, and we need to have them in here, and they're protections for people who have been in some way pointed a finger at, et cetera, and make sure that they're innocent until proven guilty, et cetera. I think we do have some anti-retaliation wording in here, but I do think maybe more explicit protection for the victim as well would be really nice, but I couldn't think of anything when we were looking at this. So once again, if somebody reading through it goes, okay, either I or my child or somebody has at some point experienced harassment, and this is what I wish we had seen in terms of behavior, in terms of, that would be really nice to get in here as well.
All right, I think for the first reading, we're good for now.
Yeah, there weren't any comments on that, were there?
I didn't receive any on this policy. Did you guys? Thank you so much for doing this, and for, it is so important, and for, starting fresh in this important topic. So, yes, again, as Leah said, please, if you're out in the community, please take a look at ACAB, this draft. It's in our packet, and if you have any suggestions, concerns, questions, please email the school committee.
Yeah, I think one final thing that we liked about this is that when MASC revised it, it was July of 2020, so we felt like it was pretty up to date.
Nice. Okay, let me go back to the agenda. I think we're still in policy. It's 9:10, so I want to make sure we hit the highlights. Let's see. I'm going to suggest that we hold off on tutoring for pay until the next meeting, so we can spend a little bit of time, maybe just a first reading on a live stream policy and not stay until midnight, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to skip item F till our next meeting. And we did receive some comments on that, and I know those have gone to the policy working group already, so if you sent a comment in, we've heard it, and it has been forwarded. So we'll just move along then to item G, the live stream policy, first reading. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. So we looked for other live streaming policies, and they were hard to find. So there were two that we had kind of read through and thought that some amalgamation of those two might be kind of nice. So what you see here is really what we have come up with. MASC does not have a live streaming policy, and so we really began with, that definition of, what is live streaming and sort of why, and then we defined synchronous and asynchronous instruction. We talked a little bit about some of the expectations for students if they are participating in live streaming, and really this is just something that kind of came very organically to sort of our group. The only part that was in yellow is the part that we really we felt like we were a little bit in the dark on, in the rare event that there's some weather or other event that impacts a particular area of the community, cutting off students' physical access to school, but they would still have electronic access to school. That would be a reason to, just have sort of spur-of-the-moment live streaming.
That's right.
We sort of thought, what would be a scenario when that might happen? So there's a tree down and the bus can't get through, so kids still have power, but they can't get to school.
And I know that someone wrote to us about that wording because they found it confusing, and we struggled with it a bit too. We added the word rare because it was in the event that there is some weather. It seemed as if this might happen more often than rarely. But what do you think in reading that, in reading Roman numeral 6? Is it clear?
The weather event one, I'm just not sure, are we getting to a point, I know in the spring, because we had taken days off, we ended up using the remote model to just kind of plow right through what would have been April vacation week. But we're not intentionally moving to or are we? What is our intention with snow days? I mean, are we saying we don't want any more days off from school, the kids playing outside, it's going to be work from home on those days?
So we really don't get to say that.
Right.
The Commissioner of Education gets to say that. You'll remember there were years when he offered to do the blizzard bags. If you got in on the pilot of blizzard bags, then you could do it for, a number of years. Allegedly that was going to stop at the end of, last year, I think. This year, he has pretty much said, you can work right through your snow days because that's where you are. It will be interesting to see what path he takes. But one of the things that we know about Commissioner Riley is he's not a big fan of the blizzard bag because he feels like there's terrible inequity. If you are a school district where everybody has, technology at your fingertips and parents who are able to stay home with you on a snow day, you have a lot more advantage than if you're a school district where children by and large don't have those advantages. So I can't imagine that he's going to love the idea of just being able to say, okay, this is a remote day when it snows. And personally, Joe, I kind of agree with your thinking that there is something nice about unplugging for a day and just relaxing as a family or enjoying the snow or going outside to play or, so it's different.
Yeah, and I don't want to presume that I know what would be the consensus of the community on that one, but yeah. But I wonder if we, on the live streaming policy, if we need to get into the reason, I don't know, do we need to get into that level of detail or leave it up to the district to decide when live streaming would be applied? The policy would be about, how to apply it or limitations on applying it, but it would be up to the district to decide when, under what circumstances.
Right. And that's why we made sure that the sentence does say that district reserves the right, so they don't have to during one of these situations.
Okay.
Presuming that we pass this policy in this calendar year, I'm not clear, is the weather event intended to be used in this school year, or is this something we're reserving the right for but not intending to do this year? Would that be, say, January, a tree falls down and knocks out access for everybody who lives, up in the Valleywood area or something like
Yep.
that.
Yes, I think we were looking sort of off into the future, not just, limited to this year with COVID.
But I guess more to what I'm thinking is that we're not currently live streaming general classes in the younger grades, so that would, I would want to think about that a lot more with our teachers and the community before we put that into the policy.
Yes.
It's funny, because what I thought would come up as a weather blurb was exactly the opposite. And where I was thinking language would be nice would be to say, in the event that a significant part of the community no longer has access. Like for those, so when we are live streaming in the few classes in the secondary school, that's our delivery mode. But if we have a power outage in a neighborhood and a bunch of those kids, 15 kids or whatever, are unable to connect, I just was thinking there might be language that says the district reserves the right to adjust the learning mode for the day or something, like something so that it might go from a live stream day to a push out. I don't know what it would become, but I worry about us when we are dependent on electricity. What happens when we don't have it? And if the schools are out, or the whole town is out, we know, but sometimes it's a fluke thing. In one neighborhood, I've certainly had no power, and my kids have come to school, because the schools are open. But if I were a remote learner, what would I do? So I didn't know, and I don't even know what it would say, because this is all new territory, but I didn't know if we just, maybe not this clause, but maybe if we needed a clause that said, the district reserves the right to pivot in some other direction, in the event of a significant interruption of of live streaming delivery capability or whatever. I don't know, that's kind of where I was thinking, but I agree, I have some hesitation about this little blurb right now.
And it feels very much in the weeds, too, just based on how many, I can't recall a time when the physical access may be sometimes difficult because somebody's alarm didn't go off or something like that, but.
In fact, Susan and I were laughing about this the other day, because the goal would then be to say, okay, so there's a tree down here, how do you reroute that bus to go all the way around to get, and typically what will happen is by the time that bus gets there, one of the neighbors will say to the kids, get in the car, I'll drive everyone to school. Right. So the bus gets there and doesn't pick anybody up anyway.
That's right, that's right.
I think somebody made a really good point that we need to think about too, about number 4. Parents, guardians may not be present for remotely instructed or live stream classes. So we were thinking of that as, we don't want teachers to feel like they're being judged by a parent, et cetera. But it was a good point that a parent brought up, that in the younger grades, you sort of have to be in and out helping the child, because the child is too young to do several things on their own. So I don't know what the wording would be, but I do see that point, and I do think we have to go back and kind of tweak that thought a little bit to make sure that we cover those cases in a way that makes sense.
Right, you don't want me, taking the mic from my third grader and talking to the teacher.
Right, exactly.
But it would be okay for me to help him expand his window to the full screen.
Exactly. So how to make sure that we've created that balance.
So you want to go to the addendum, the form, and revise that?
Yeah. I think that will be part of the revision, is how to revise that piece.
There were other concerns about the form, maybe not reflecting the policy, and particularly on special education. I think that came up, and I have to call up the email, but there was definitely a concern that about the rights accorded to families when, if a special education service is involved, and the form, maybe the wording of the form was tricky around that. So I think maybe the form needs some more work, and I can forward on the email to you guys if you haven't, I don't know if you've received it, about that.
Yeah, and maybe this form has been revised since that parent saw it.
Maybe, yep.
I did send a request to MASC to ask if they had the nomenclature for this policy. No one responded, so I wrote someone else at MASC. No one responded, so I wrote someone else at MASC. And they still haven't responded. I think they're so busy trying to write their own live streaming policy.
Right.
Because we're way ahead of the game.
Right, that's.
So thank you so much for charting this. You know,
Yeah.
this is uncharted territory here with this, obviously. Even Mass can't give you guidance. So I hope the community will take a look at this. And I think the intention here is to provide the policy safeguards for our current live streaming situation. Is that right?
Yes, and I think just one thing worth mentioning is we were looking at the live streaming policy that had been in place in Wales for some years, and their language was so different from ours. You know, our policies are so concerned with our perhaps being sued by people, that litigiousness is embedded in everything. And the Welsh were just counting on people to be good. So we couldn't really use all of their language because we're not good in this country, right?
Now, Meg.
Well, did you watch the debate the other night?
I think one last thing that we didn't consider, and once again, you know, we worked over more than 2 days on this, so when we were talking, I did not think of it, but an equity thing, right? So like, a child may not be able to live stream at home, but maybe they can live stream in a library, right? And that may create a very different public situation for that child that we have not taken into account. So that's probably something that we also need to consider.
If they can't get to school, I would imagine they might have trouble getting to the library too, though.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the main portion of it
Okay,
as opposed
gotcha.
to the special weather piece, more around the lines of, you know, I walk a few blocks down to the library because, you know, I get good connection there and I have the ability to use technology there. So it's just something that I think we need to consider as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll continue to work on this till the next meeting.
And thanks for your feedback, and we'll keep at it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So much.
Obviously very timely.
Okay, so we are up to, we can talk quickly about policy BBA, School Committee Powers and Duties. I did not receive any comments. People don't care that much about school committee responsibilities and duties, so we didn't get a lot of comments on that. I mean, I don't know how you feel about if you're ready to vote it or you want to let it sit another reading.
I'm okay letting it sit for another reading. I think it's a nice, concise compilation of all the different sources of our responsibility, and but I'd be willing to let it sit in case there is any feedback.
Fair enough, yeah, we'll bring it back and we'll vote
Okay.
at the next meeting. So again, to the community, this is a policy that basically, in a succinct way, defines the, sort of the job of school committee and outlines each one of our responsibilities. So if you would like to take a look, if you have any questions, please let us know and we will bring it back.
And I think the only change we made to it was we put in the actual titles.
I did notice that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we're on public comment again, which we normally don't do a second time, though I did receive an email asking why the question wasn't read tonight. I didn't know it was a public comment question. Do you think that I should read it? It wasn't marked.
Yeah, I think it's fine to read it.
Okay, so we did receive a question, it was from Mary Rooney, who I believe is a resident. It was not read with the first round because it didn't have sort of public comment clearly identified, so it sometimes is confusing for us whether you're just looking for a response in an email or if you want us to read it. So I'm happy to read it. The subject is quarantine students, and the question was, I'm going to put my glasses on. In light of the two current COVID-positive cases in school and the numerous students being asked to quarantine, will there be any amendments to planning for out-of-school instruction? In other words, since this is likely to happen again and the students will be missing weeks of school, is there any possibility of additional support being considered for those students? Whether it's allowing access to what's going on in their particular classrooms through video, or maybe a dedicated substitute teacher who is Zoom available for help with lessons, or some other mechanism that our wonderful teachers come up with. Thank you and keep up the good work, Mary Rooney. Okay, and did we get any other emails? Did we miss any other ones? We had quite a few tonight, so.
I pulled them out by the keyword of public comment, so I don't think,
Okay.
if it came to me, I think all of them that came to all of us now have been read, with the exception
Excellent.
of that one.
Future agenda items. Does anybody have anything in particular that we're... And items by consensus, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, Superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the 2 items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Nancy,
Second.
second by Joe. All those in favor? Aye. And that passes, and that means that we are shockingly ahead of schedule. It is 9:30, and I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
Yes.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we are adjourned. Our next meeting is on October 15th at 7 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you for watching.